It's now my honor to introduce a woman who is a living legend. Dolores Huerta has fought on behalf of some of the most vulnerable workers in this country for more than half a century, really longer than more than half a century. I'm not going to get into age, but she's been doing it so diligently, ferociously, tenaciously, thinking both about women's rights, workers' rights, and you know, was born, I think it's public record, 10 years after the 19th Amendment that we're talking about today. Recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Dolores Huerta continues to lead on issues of civil rights and equality. I'm also proud to say she is one of the 100 women the Hill is focused on in this issue. Dolores, such an honor to meet you and talk to you. I started off our program today asking one of our guests to think back about the 19th Amendment and its passage. And I admitted my ignorance, that I did not realize that that didn't fix things, that there were lots of people who remained unable to vote, lots of women who remained unable to vote. So let me ask you, because you've been at this longer than any one of us have, what hasn't been achieved or done, or what are the battles that still need to be fought to make that amendment mean the words on the paper?
Well, I think one of the things that we have just as an immediate challenge right now is voter suppression. Especially when it comes to women of color. And when we see that there are so many governors and secretaries of state throughout the United States that are doing all that they can to prevent women and, of course, men from voting. But since we, as women, are the majority, you might say that it hits us a little bit harder, and especially women of color, when they are doing everything that they can to make sure that women cannot vote. In this upcoming election, which is just a month away from us here today. So I think that is something that we have to think about. The other thing is that we as women are still fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment. And this is, of course, a convention that exists in the United Nations. Virginia, in the election of 2018, was the 38th state to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment for women. We still have to have the U.S. Senate to be able to ratify that. And there are still some senators out there, especially from some of these conservative states, that are not really agreeing to the fact that, hey, we as women should have equal rights as men. So those are some of the burdens that we have, of course, in front of us. In terms of women representation, we're only 36% of the Congress of the United States right now. And since, again, women are the majority of the population, we should be at 51% of the U.S. Congress. And, of course, I think many states have really been able to move forward. And so we have, like, the state of Nevada, for instance, which has a majority of women right now in their state legislature. So, I think that we're making a lot of progress. But as you mentioned, we do still have a long way to go.
Dolores, let me ask you a question. I'm going to butcher this quote, and I apologize to everyone, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that people ought to fight for what they believe in, but fight for it in such a way that you bring people along with you. You've been fighting in that way for a long time, and I'm just interested in, are there tricks of the trade in bringing people on? I mean, you've been challenging the status quo for workers' rights and all things for a long time. What is part of the tectonics of bringing people along so that movements happen and they don't remain just single boutiques of just someone standing up, trying to do the right thing, but not bringing people along?
Well, I think that's what we do as organizers. As organizers, we try to enlighten people, explain to people what the issues are, how we got there, and the things that we need to do to solve them. And it takes a lot of patience to be able to do that. However, I think that because of the tools that we have now at our disposal, where we have the internet and we have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all of these devices that people now have, that we can get information out there a lot easier. Because of Google, of course, everybody can search everything. So you might say that knowledge is very accessible to everybody. And you really can't hide anything either, because you can Google it and find out, where it's coming from and who's doing it. So I do have a lot of faith that we will be able to move forward a lot faster when it comes to issues of racial justice. We saw the Me Too movement and the women's marches, where women were able to assemble and gather together in huge, huge numbers. Millions of women all over the world that were marching for the rights of women. So this, of course, gives me a lot of hope. And the other thing is, I think if we can always remember to do everything that we do with non-violence, not using violence in our approaches, because when you do things with non-violence, you're actually doing it with love. And while people disagree with us, then we don't want to turn that disappointment that we have into anger or into any kind of hurtful action. We have to do what we do with love, and knowing that maybe people out there, they're not ready to hear our message yet, but that doesn't mean that we give up on them, that we do want to talk the message of equality, I should say equity, and to share the resources that we have on our planet with everyone. We are, I like to say, Homo sapiens. You know, the only way that we survived on our planet, and when we started our civilization in Africa, where human beings started, the first human beings came from Africa, and the only way that we survived on our planet is by taking care of each other and supporting each other and sharing everything that we have. And if we can remember those principles that we are one human race and continue to work together, I think we can solve most of the challenges. And yet, I want to just throw in one other thing, is to save our democratic society, which basically says that we as people have the intelligence to be able to govern ourselves. And I think that we can make it happen.
Dolores, I'm going to ask you, this may be out of left field, but I think it's important for people learning to understand the framing you're bringing to things and how you've turned obstacles into opportunities. But is there a time in your history where there was an opponent that was a very big opponent that you were able to turn into an ally?
Well, I think once that you win, your opponents become allies, but they often don't do it. You might say they don't volunteer. You might have to pass a law that makes them become your ally, and then they will become your allies. I can remember once, working with the growers there in California, when they were trying to put a nuclear plant in the Central Valley of California where all the food is grown. And that is a time when the Farm Workers Union and the growers all got together and said, no, we don't want any nuclear plants here in the Central Valley of California. And of course, that effort was headed up by Jane Fonda and Tom Hayden, two people that were very supportive of the grape boycott and were not necessarily friends of the growers. But I think when we understand that it's to all of our self-interest, everybody, that we get rid of some of these inequities that we have in our society, because everybody becomes a victim when we have hatred and division. And we find out that when we all work together, this is when we all win. And when we have division, then we all lose.
Dolores, I know we're coming to the end of our conversation, which I'm sad about, because it's fascinating to hear the things you've done for so many others. But I just ask as I understand it, you're still working all the time. You sleep about 7 hours a night, and you're out there working 12, 13, 14 hours a day. So what is your dashboard of concern? What are your list of priorities for your activities right now?
Well, right now, we've been working very, very hard on the census, because we know so many Latinos are fearful of the census because of all of the attacks that they received from President Trump. We're working very hard on getting people out to vote right now. We're working on our educational system so we can bring into our curriculums, the history of the United States of America, so we can end the racism and people will understand how this country was built, this was a brown country when the first immigrants came here from Europe, and that we have to stop all of this hatred and attacking people because of the color of their skin or their religion, whatever it may be. This is something that we're working on. We want to get into our curriculums the real history of the United States of America. Who built the country? It was indigenous Native Americans. It was African Americans, African slaves, that built the White House and the Congress and all of the immigrants that contributed to build our country. So we want to just have some racial justice and the racism, the sexism, the homophobia, and actually work towards a world where we can all share the resources of our planet together. I like to say that we never would have survived on this planet had we not protected and cared for each other and taken care of each other. And we can achieve that. So we've just got to erase the inequities. And we're working really on social justice and empowering people through our grassroots community organizing.
And then just finally, recently I spoke with Angela Davis, another icon in women's rights and civil rights. And I asked her how, was she optimistic about where the tilt of things were going right now? And she said she was. She saw this as an interesting inflection point. She was hopeful that women in particular were leading away, and there's been a sort of a shift in women's role in these issues. And she sort of felt like the allies were there on racial justice that were not there as robustly as before. And so let me ask you the same question. You know, are you optimistic, or do you have concerns about where the tilt, where American society is going right now?
No, I am very, very optimistic, because I do believe that the majority of the Americans in the United States, that we have good hearts, that people really care about other people. We care about justice, because that's the way that we've all been raised in this country. And I feel sorry for all of the extremists out there, the white supremacists, and I feel sorry for them, because they probably never had a chance to really know people of color, you know, work with them, live with them, and understand how much richer our lives are when we know about other people's cultures, other people's languages, and what other people have to offer our society. And that's why I think education is really at the core of this, because we know children are not born racist. They learn that from their cultures or from their parents. So if we can start bringing ethnic studies right into pre-K, and not only ethnic studies, but gender studies, so little boys will realize that girls are equal, maybe not in physical strength, but women are not sex objects. And we can bring in environmental studies and then civic education, so people can understand why it's so important for them to vote. I think that when we say, what are we working on? We are working on democracy. And we know democracy cannot work unless everybody participates. So, and people have to be informed. So I think education and civic action, these are the main issues that we have to really focus on right now.
Well, Dolores Huerta, one of the Hill's 100 women, talking about rights and the things we still need to do 100 years after the passage of the 19th Amendment. Thank you so much for your thoughts and joining us today.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. And by the way, we should not use the word icon. We should say the word I can.
Great. We'll do that.